Humans are the only known sentient species that willingly evolved on a poison world. I remember laughing when I first read that line in the Galactic Council's preliminary report on Earth. As an astrobiologist, I'd spent my career studying the possibilities of alien life. But I never expected aliens to consider us the weird ones. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sat in my lab at the Xenological Research Center, watching their crystalline ship descend through our toxic atmosphere. The ship's hull gleamed like polished diamond, refracting the morning sunlight into rainbow patterns across the landing pad. As the vessel touched down, I noticed something odd about its surface. Where our atmosphere made contact with the hull, a subtle darkening appeared. Oxidation. Their advanced ship was literally rusting before my eyes. Commander James Kincaid stepped up beside me, his cybernetic eye whirring as it adjusted to the ship's brilliance. "Dr. Blackwood, please tell me you're seeing what I'm seeing. If you mean the fact that their super-advanced alien ship can't handle a little oxygen, then yes." I pulled out my atmospheric analyzer, already recording data. This could be interesting. The ship's entry ramp extended, and that's when things got really fascinating. A shimmer of energy formed around the opening, a containment field keeping our atmosphere at bay. 3 figures emerged, their environmental suits unlike anything I'd seen in my years of theoretical xenobiology. The aliens moved with a fluid grace that made them appear almost weightless. Their suits were a maze of intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow. But what caught my attention was the thick plating around their respiratory systems. They were terrified of our air. "Welcome to Earth," I said through the translation device we'd been provided. "I'm Dr. Marcus Blackwood, and this is Commander Kincaid." The tallest alien stepped forward, its suit's external sensors flaring with activity. When it spoke, the translator rendered its words in a neutral tone that couldn't hide the underlying anxiety. "Your atmosphere, you actually breathe this corrosive mix." I smiled. "Not only do we breathe it, we evolved to depend on it. Oxygen is essential for human life." The aliens' sensor arrays flickered in what I would later learn was their equivalent of horrified disbelief. Impossible. No advanced species could develop in such conditions, the molecular damage alone. Kincaid cleared his throat. "Doc, maybe you should explain about the mitochondria." I was already pulling up displays on my tablet. "Actually, what's impossible is imagining complex life without oxygen. You see, Earth's early atmosphere was very different. When photosynthetic organisms appeared, they started producing oxygen as a waste product. It was literally pollution to the existing life forms. But some organisms adapted, learned to use this corrosive gas, and found it gave them enormous amounts of energy." The second alien, shorter and more heavily built, stepped forward. Its translator crackled. "Energy? From a corrosive gas?" "Oxygen is highly reactive," I explained. "That's why it's corroding your ship right now. But our cells have specialized organelles called mitochondria that harness that reactivity to produce energy. It's incredibly efficient." The third alien, who had been silent until now, moved closer to examine my tablet. "Your species deliberately maintains this oxidizing atmosphere. You have the technology to create proper environmental conditions." Kincaid laughed. "Proper? We tried living in low-oxygen environments, high-altitude bases, underwater facilities. Know what we found? Humans get stronger when we struggle. Our bodies adapt, produce more red blood cells, become more efficient. The harsh conditions of Earth didn't limit us, they forged us." I noticed the alien suits were showing signs of stress. Small patches of discoloration were appearing on their external surfaces. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion inside your ship. Your environmental suits seem to be having some difficulty with our atmosphere." The tallest alien's translator produced what might have been a relieved sigh. "Yes, we must report these findings to the Council, a species that thrives in corrosive conditions. This changes many assumptions." As we walked toward their ship, Kincaid muttered under his breath, "They haven't even seen what happens when we exercise yet. Wait until they learn about our endurance hunting." I grinned. One shock at a time. Commander, let's not give them respiratory failure on their first day. Inside their ship, surrounded by their carefully regulated, oxygen-free environment, I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Humanity had spent its entire existence adapting to conditions that other species considered lethal. We hadn't just survived. We turned our toxic world's greatest threat into our greatest strength. The aliens gathered around a central console, their suits now showing visible signs of wear. "We must understand," the tall one said. "How does your species handle the continuous oxidative stress, the free radical damage?" "That's the beautiful part," I explained. "We developed antioxidant systems, cellular repair mechanisms. Our entire biology is built around not just surviving oxidative stress, but thriving in it. Every breath we take would kill most species, but for us, it's the spark of life." Kincaid stepped closer to the console, his cybernetic eye scanning the alien text. "You're not just dealing with a species that tolerates oxygen," he said. "You're dealing with a species that turned a planetary poison into a weapon, a tool, and a source of power. Every human is basically a walking oxidation reactor." The alien sensor arrays all flickered rapidly. The shorter one turned to its companions and spoke in their native language, untranslated. Whatever it said caused them to step back. "The Council must be informed immediately," the tall one declared. "This changes everything. A species that weaponized corrosion itself." As they huddled together, discussing implications in their native tongue, I caught Kincaid's eye. He was grinning. "Think we scared them, Doc?" I watched as more patches of oxidation appeared on their environmental suits. "I think we just redefined their concept of hostile environment, and we haven't even told them about our immune system yet." "Save something for the second date," Kincaid chuckled. "Something tells me the galaxy isn't ready for the full human experience." Looking at our visitors' growing discomfort, I had to agree. We'd just shown them that every human being was, by their standards, a walking ecological disaster. And somehow, I suspected that was exactly why they'd be back. Because in a galaxy where oxidation was feared, humanity had made it our greatest ally. We weren't just surviving in our poison world, we were thriving in it. And that made us very interesting indeed. The most advanced spaceship in the galaxy was being destroyed by the simple act of breathing. I stood in the observation deck of the Galactic Council vessel Eternal Harmony, watching as patches of rust spread across its internal surfaces like a time-lapse of decay. The ship's atmospheric containment systems had failed spectacularly during what was supposed to be a routine demonstration of human adaptability. Now, Earth's normal atmosphere was leaking into sections of the ship that had never been designed to handle oxygen. "Commander Kincaid's cybernetic," I whirred as he assessed the damage. "How long until the backup systems fail?" I checked my atmospheric analyzer, watching the oxygen levels rise steadily. "At this rate, maybe 20 minutes. Their anti-corrosion fields are burning through power faster than they can regenerate." The ship's corridors echoed with the sound of emergency alerts in a dozen alien languages. Through the observation window, I could see crew members in environmental suits rushing to seal off affected sections. Their movements were becoming increasingly erratic as panic set in. "Ironic, isn't it?" Kincaid mused, his hand resting on his sidearm. "They invited us up here to prove humans could survive in their environment. Instead, they're learning why their environment can't survive us." The ship's chief engineer, a tall crystalline being called First Builder, approached us. Its environmental suit showed signs of stress, microfractures appearing where the seals met. "Dr. Blackwood, the containment breach is spreading. Our standard protocols are insufficient." I nodded, already pulling up schematics on my tablet. The Galactic Council had provided these as part of their cultural exchange, never imagining we'd need them to save their own ship. "The problem isn't just the oxygen. Your ship's materials were designed for stable, non-reactive environments. Earth's atmosphere is like dropping a match into a room full of kindling." First Builder's translator crackled with static. "How do humans construct anything lasting in such conditions?" The molecular degradation alone should. A deep groan echoed through the ship's structure, cutting off First Builder's question. Kincaid's cybernetic, I flashed red. That was a support beam, he said grimly. Doc, we're running out of time. I looked at the spreading patterns of oxidation, my mind racing. The aliens had built their entire civilization around avoiding the very chemical reactions that made Earth life possible. Now that same fundamental difference might kill us all. Unless... First Builder, I said, pulling up a new set of calculations. I need access to your matter fabrication systems. I think I know how to save your ship, but you're not going to like it. The alien's crystalline form shimmered with what I'd learned to recognize as anxiety. Our fabricators are not designed to work with corrosive materials. That's exactly why we need them, I replied, already heading toward the engineering section. Sometimes the only way to stop a fire is to start a bigger one. The fabrication chamber wasn't designed for this kind of modification, First Builder protested as I rerouted power conduits. The molecular stress could shatter the entire system. Kincaid stood guard at the entrance, his cybernetic eye tracking the spread of oxidation through the ship's walls. Whatever you're planning, Doc, make it fast. We've got multiple hull breaches forming on decks 3 through 7. I worked quickly, my fingers flying over the alien controls as I input the new parameters. Years of studying theoretical xenotechnology were finally paying off, though probably not in the way anyone had expected. What we consider rust, I explained while working, is just iron oxide, a naturally occurring compound on Earth. Our bodies evolved alongside it, developed ways to handle it, even use it. We need iron to survive. The ship shuddered again, and First Builder's environmental suit crackled with static. You intend to accelerate the corruption. Not corruption, transformation. I finished the last sequence. Your ship's trying to fight a chemical reaction it can't possibly win. Instead, we're going to let it happen controlled. The fabrication chamber hummed to life, its energy field taking on a reddish tinge as it began producing the compounds I'd specified. First Builder's sensor arrays flickered rapidly as it read the output. These are protective oxides? Exactly. On Earth, some forms of oxidation actually protect metals from further corrosion. We call it passivation. I directed the fabricator's output toward the ship's ventilation system. We're going to coat your ship's internal surfaces with a layer of protective rust. Kincaid chuckled darkly. Using rust to fight rust. That's either brilliant or insane. Probably both, I admitted, watching as the fabricated compounds began dispersing through the ship. But it's better than letting the ship tear itself apart. The next few minutes were tense as we watched the readings. The new oxide layer spread through the vessel's systems, creating a barrier between the vulnerable alien metals and Earth's aggressive atmosphere. Slowly, the groaning of stressed metal began to subside. First Builder's sensors were working overtime, analyzing the changes. The molecular degradation, it's stabilizing. But these oxide compounds, they're becoming part of the ship's structure. Welcome to Earth engineering, Kincaid said. Sometimes you have to embrace the problem to solve it. The ship's command center was eerily quiet when we arrived. The Galactic Council representatives stood clustered around their monitoring stations, their environmental suits now coated in a thin layer of protective oxide. They watched us enter with what I could only interpret as wary respect. Your solution, the High Administrator spoke through its translator, while effective, has fundamentally altered our vessel's composition. This ship can never again dock at most galactic ports without extensive decontamination. I nodded, checking my atmospheric analyzer. The protective oxide layer will prevent further degradation. But yes, your ship has been permanently changed, much like humanity was changed by evolving on Earth. Kincaid moved to stand beside me, his cybernetic eye scanning the now stabilized hull. You wanted to understand how humans survive in an oxidizing environment. Well, this is it. We don't just resist the corruption, we adapt to it, use it, make it part of our strength. The ship's sensors displayed the new reality of their situation. Every surface now bore a microscopic layer of protective rust, turning their pristine vessel into something that could survive contact with Earth's atmosphere. It wasn't pretty, but it was functional. The implications are disturbing, the High Administrator continued. If simple human breath can force such fundamental changes in our technology, then imagine what we could do if we actually tried, Kincaid finished, a slight edge to his voice. I quickly intervened, pulling up more data on my tablet. Or imagine what we could teach you. Earth organisms have spent billions of years developing solutions to these exact problems. Solutions that could revolutionize your engineering, your medicine, your entire approach to hostile environments. First Builder, who had been analyzing the modified systems, turned to address its superiors. The human solution, while unorthodox, demonstrates an understanding of chemical processes we had dismissed as merely destructive. Perhaps there are other assumptions we should reconsider. The High Administrator's sensor arrays pulsed in what I'd learned to recognize as deep thought. Dr. Blackwood, your species has transformed our ship into something that would be considered contaminated by most of our civilization. And yet, it is now more capable of surviving extreme conditions than any vessel in our fleet. That's humanity in a nutshell, Kincaid said. We take what tries to kill us and turn it into an advantage. I watched as more data streamed across their monitors, showing how the oxide layer was actually strengthening certain parts of the ship's structure. Your vessel isn't contaminated, I explained. It's evolved, just like we did. The High Administrator turned to face us fully. The Galactic Council will need to reevaluate its classification of Earth and its inhabitants. You are not simply surviving in a toxic environment. You are transforming it and us. As we left the command center, Kincaid glanced at me. Think they finally understand? I looked back at the altered ship, its surfaces now bearing the permanent mark of human influence. They're beginning to, and something tells me this is just the start. The ship's new oxide coating gleamed dully under the lights, a testament to humanity's unique approach to survival. We hadn't just solved their immediate problem, we'd shown them a completely new way of thinking about adaptation and survival. And somewhere in the vast database of the Galactic Council, Earth's classification was being updated from toxic world to something far more interesting. Crucible of innovation. The first sign of trouble wasn't the alarms, it was the silence. Standing in the newly constructed Galactic Embassy's Grand Hall, I noticed the subtle shift in atmosphere when the environmental systems failed. The usual soft hum of alien respiratory equipment suddenly ceased, replaced by an eerie quiet that made my skin crawl. 3 minutes before the official reception was scheduled to begin, and already something had gone catastrophically wrong. I caught Commander Kincaid's eye across the room, his cybernetic implant already glowing red with threat assessment. Doc, his voice crackled through my earpiece, atmospheric containment is failing. Oxygen levels are rising in all sealed chambers. Around us, alien diplomats began to show signs of distress. Their environmental suits, designed for brief exposure to Earth's atmosphere, weren't meant for prolonged protection. I watched in horror as microfractures started appearing in their protective gear. This isn't a malfunction, I said, pulling out my atmospheric analyzer. The oxygen levels are rising too quickly. Someone's deliberately pumping Earth's normal atmosphere into the sealed zones. The Grand Hall erupted into chaos. Alien delegates stumbled and collapsed as their protective systems failed one by one. Their suits, designed to handle brief exposure to oxidizing environments, were literally dissolving before our eyes. Kincaid was already moving, his military training kicking in. We've got multiple breach points. Someone's weaponized our atmosphere. I rushed to the nearest fallen diplomat, a crystalline elder whose suit was showing advanced signs of degradation. They're not just trying to kill them, I realized, horror dawning. They're trying to prove a point about human superiority. The embassy's main doors sealed automatically, trapping us inside with rising oxygen levels. Through the ornate windows, I could see Earth's sun setting over the horizon, casting an almost ironic golden glow over the unfolding disaster. "Marcus," Kincaid's voice was tense, "we've got about 10 minutes before these suits fail completely. After that—" I didn't need him to finish the sentence. After that, we'd have a diplomatic catastrophe that would make first contact look like a pleasant conversation. Humanity's first alien embassy was about to become a tomb, unless we could figure out how to save species that considered our very breath a deadly weapon. "Get them to the maintenance level," I shouted over the growing chaos. "The atmospheric processing units are down there. We might be able to create safe zones." Kincaid was already organizing the human security staff, directing them to assist the struggling alien diplomats. His cybernetic eye pulsed rapidly, mapping the safest route through the building. "The maintenance level wasn't designed for diplomatic gatherings," he warned. "It's industrial-grade equipment down there." "Exactly," I replied, helping a crystalline elder to its feet. "Industrial-grade seals, independent power systems, and most importantly, atmospheric scrubbers." The journey to the maintenance level was a nightmare of failing environmental suits and panicking aliens. Every step revealed more evidence that this was a carefully planned attack. Emergency systems had been sabotaged, backup generators disabled, and escape routes sealed. "Whoever did this knows exactly how vulnerable they are to our atmosphere," Kincaid muttered as we reached the maintenance level doors. "This isn't just terrorism, it's xenocide." Inside the maintenance level, I rushed to the atmospheric control panels. Years of studying alien technology were about to be put to the ultimate test. "We need to create a reverse osmosis effect," I explained, fingers flying over the controls. "Use the scrubbers to pull oxygen out of sealed chambers." "How long?" Kincaid asked, positioning guards at strategic points. "Too long," I admitted, watching the atmospheric readings. "Their suits will fail before we can clear all the oxygen. We need a faster solution." That's when I noticed something about the alien diplomats' reactions. Not all of them were affected equally. The crystalline elder I'd helped was showing less degradation than others, despite having similar exposure. Their molecular structure, I realized suddenly. Some of them have already begun adapting to limited oxygen exposure from previous Earth visits. Their bodies are learning. Kincaid's cybernetic, I focused on the elder. "Can we use that?" "Maybe," I said, already reformulating my plan. "But we'll need their help, and they'll have to trust us completely." The commander nodded grimly. "Nothing builds trust like surviving an assassination attempt together." "What you're suggesting is unprecedented," the crystalline elder's translator crackled, its voice weak from the strain of Earth's atmosphere. "To deliberately alter our molecular structure." "Your bodies are already doing it," I explained, pointing to the readings on my analyzer. "Those of you who've had previous Earth contact are showing signs of adaptation. We can accelerate that process using the embassy's molecular restructuring chambers." The maintenance level had become our last stronghold, filled with dozens of struggling alien diplomats. Their environmental suits were failing one by one, creating a timeline that grew shorter with each passing minute. Kincaid's security team had established a perimeter, but we all knew it was only a matter of time before the attackers realized where we'd gone. His cybernetic eye continuously scanned for threats while maintaining a link to the building's compromised security systems. The restructuring chambers were designed for cleaning and repairing environmental suits, one of the alien technicians protested. "Not for biological modification." "Right now, they're our only chance," I said, already programming the necessary changes. "The chambers can create a graduated exposure environment, allowing your bodies to adapt incrementally rather than all at once." The crystalline elder studied my calculations, its crystalline form showing signs of stress fractures. "The process you describe, it would fundamentally alter our biology. We would become something different." "You already are different," Kincaid interjected, stepping away from his security post. "Every moment you spend on Earth changes you. Right now, we're just trying to make sure those changes don't kill you." A loud explosion echoed from above, followed by the sound of breaking glass. The attackers had breached the upper levels. "We're out of time," Kincaid announced, his cybernetic eye glowing bright red. "Doc, whatever you're going to do it now." The elder turned to address the other diplomats, its translator struggling to keep up with the rapid communication. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only seconds, it turned back to me. "We accept your solution, Dr. Blackwood. But know that this decision will have consequences far beyond this moment." I nodded, already activating the restructuring chambers. Sometimes survival requires evolution. Humanity learned that lesson long ago. The next 30 minutes were a blur of activity. We processed the aliens through the modified chambers in groups, carefully monitoring their molecular changes. Each group emerged different subtle alterations in their crystalline structures, new patterns that could withstand limited oxygen exposure. Kincaid's team engaged in brief firefights with the attackers, using their superior knowledge of the maintenance levels layout to maintain our security. The sound of combat echoed through the chambers, punctuated by the hum of the restructuring equipment. "Marcus," Kincaid called out during a lull in the fighting, "they're pulling back. Something's changed." I checked the atmospheric readings and smiled. "They're pulling back because their weapon isn't working anymore. The adapted diplomats are stabilizing the atmosphere just by existing in it. They're acting like living scrubbers." The elder approached me, its newly modified form refracting light in strange new patterns. "We have become something unprecedented," it said, its translator now working perfectly despite the oxygen-rich environment. "Neither purely our original selves, nor fully adapted to Earth conditions, but something in between." "That's the thing about evolution," I replied, watching as more diplomats emerged from the chambers, each slightly different from before. "It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming good enough to survive and then finding new ways to thrive." Kincaid joined us, his cybernetic eye finally shifting from red to its normal blue. The attackers wanted to prove human superiority. Instead, they proved that adaptation is stronger than ideology. The elder's form shimmed in what I now recognized as agreement. "Perhaps this is why your species survived its toxic world, not because you were stronger, but because you were willing to change." As emergency teams finally broke through to our location, I watched the adapted diplomats helping their unchanged colleagues. In trying to drive aliens away from Earth, the attackers had instead created something entirely new, the first generation of oxygen-resistant alien species. The embassy incident, as it would later be known, didn't end diplomatic relations as the attackers had hoped. Instead, it became the catalyst for a new era of human-alien cooperation. Sometimes, it takes a crisis to prove that survival depends not on resistance to change, but on the willingness to embrace it. The galactic combat trials were never meant to include humans. That's probably why we broke them. I stood in the observation deck of the massive arena station, watching as Commander Kincaid prepared for his first match. After the embassy incident, the more militant species of the Galactic Council had demanded proof that humans weren't just survivors, but warriors worthy of respect. "This is unnecessary," the crystalline elder said beside me, its modified form gleaming under the artificial lights. "Your species has already proven its resilience." "Tell that to the warrior clades," I replied, checking the atmospheric readings for the combat zone. "They don't respect survival, they respect victory." Below us, the arena's environmental systems were cycling through different atmospheric compositions. The standard trials involved combat in neutral environments, but the warrior clades had insisted on testing human adaptability. They wanted to see how Kincaid would perform under rapidly changing conditions. "Your commander understands that these trials typically have a 40% mortality rate?" the elder asked, its translator conveying genuine concern. I watched as Kincaid checked his minimal equipment one last time. No powered armor, no environmental suits, just basic combat gear and the clothes on his back. His cybernetic eye glowed steadily, already analyzing the arena's layout. "What the warrior clades don't understand," I said, pulling up Kincaid's biometric data on my tablet, is that humans don't just survive hostile environments, we turn them into advantages. The arena's main doors opened, revealing Kincaid's first opponent, a massive warrior from the methane-breathing Korthak species, encased in environment-regulated battle armor. The crowd of alien spectators buzzed with excitement, their various environmental suits creating a shimmer of energy fields throughout the observation deck. The trial begins in 3 cycles, the arena's AI announced. Atmospheric composition will vary randomly. Combat continues until submission or incapacitation. I watched Kincaid's vital signs, noting how his heart rate remained steady. After years of working together, I knew that calm demeanor masked a tactical mind that was already 10 steps ahead. They think they're testing his combat skills, I explained to the elder. But what they're really going to learn is why Earth's harsh conditions created the galaxy's most dangerous survivors. The countdown began, and I couldn't help but smile. The warrior clades were about to learn what happens when you challenge a species that evolved on a world that tried to kill it every single day of its existence. The first atmospheric shift hit like a hammer. The arena filled with methane-rich air, perfect for the Korthak warrior, but potentially lethal to humans. I watched Kincaid's oxygen levels plummet on my monitors, yet his movement remained fluid, deliberate. "Impossible," one of the warrior clade observers hissed through their translator. "His respiratory system should be failing." "Human bodies can function without oxygen for longer than you'd think," I explained, tracking Kincaid's vital signs. "We call it anaerobic metabolism. Evolution's backup plan for when things go wrong." The Korthak warrior charged, its battle armor whining with servos and hydraulics. Kincaid waited until the last possible moment before moving, using his opponent's momentum against them. The massive alien crashed into the arena wall, leaving a dent in the reinforced material. "Your commander," the elder observed. "He's not fighting the atmosphere. He's using it." I nodded, watching as Kincaid positioned himself near one of the atmospheric vents. Humans learned long ago that you can't overpower nature. You have to work with it. The arena's AI announced another atmospheric shift. This time, the air became super-oxygenated. The Korthak's armor began showing signs of oxidation, its joints creaking as the metal degraded. Kincaid's vitals spiked, but not from distress. His muscles were getting more oxygen than they'd ever had before. He moved faster, hit harder, his body turning the hostile environment into raw power. "Now you'll see why we survived Earth," I said, as Kincaid launched into a series of strikes that left his opponent staggering. "High oxygen levels that would kill most species, they make us stronger." The warrior clade observers shifted uncomfortably as Kincaid systematically dismantled their champion's defenses. Each atmospheric change that should have weakened him instead revealed new aspects of human adaptability. When the air turned acidic, Kincaid used the condensation on his opponent's armor to increase the corrosion. In low pressure, he utilized the reduced air resistance to move more efficiently. Every environmental weapon thrown at him became another tool in his arsenal. "Your species," the elder's translator crackled with what sounded like awe. "You don't just endure. You weaponize the very things that should destroy you." I watched as Kincaid delivered a final, decisive blow, using the latest atmospheric shift to blind his opponent before disabling their armor's primary systems. That's what the warrior clades don't understand. Earth didn't make us tough, it made us adaptable. The arena fell silent as the Korthak warrior signaled submission. The combat had lasted less than 15 minutes, but it had demonstrated centuries of evolutionary advantages. "The trial isn't over," one of the warrior clade observers noted. "There are 4 more opponents." I smiled, watching Kincaid's vital signs return to normal as he prepared for the next bout. "Then they'll learn 4 more lessons about why you shouldn't underestimate a species that treats poison as breath and corrosion as strength." The third atmospheric shift brought temperatures hot enough to melt standard polymers. Sweat evaporated instantly from Kincaid's skin as he faced his third opponent, a silicon-based warrior from the volcanic worlds of the Magna Cluster. Your commander's core temperature is approaching critical levels, the elder warned, its crystalline form vibrating with concern as it studied my monitoring equipment. Watch his breathing pattern, I replied, pointing to the biometric data. Humans developed something we call thermal regulation. Our bodies are basically walking cooling systems. The arena had become a furnace, heat rippling through the air in visible waves. The Silicon Warrior moved with confident grace, its natural environment recreated perfectly by the arena systems. Most species would have already succumbed to heat stroke or dehydration. You're seeing millions of years of evolution at work, I explained to the growing crowd of observers. Humans evolved as persistence hunters under the African sun. We learned to regulate our temperature through sweating, something most species never developed. Kincaid's cybernetic, I glowed brighter than usual, compensating for the heat distortion. He had already defeated 2 opponents, the Korthak warrior and a cryogenic specialist from the Outer Rim. Each victory had demonstrated different aspects of human adaptability. The human isn't just surviving, one of the warrior clade observers noted, their translator struggling with the concept. He's maintaining combat effectiveness. The Silicon Warrior attacked, its crystalline limbs superheated to temperatures that would melt flesh on contact. Kincaid dodged with practiced precision, using the hot air currents to predict his opponent's movements. His earlier fights had taught the observers about human respiratory and metabolic adaptations. Now he was showing them something else, our mastery of thermodynamics. Thermal regulation isn't just about cooling down, I continued, watching as Kincaid executed a complex series of maneuvers. It's about maintaining homeostasis under extreme conditions. Our bodies are constantly fighting to maintain the perfect internal temperature, regardless of external conditions. The Silicon Warrior launched a devastating attack, turning the very air into a weapon with its heat signature. But Kincaid had been waiting for this. He used the superheated air currents to enhance his movement, riding the thermal updrafts like a bird of prey. Impossible, the Silicon Warrior's handler protested. No carbon-based life form should be able to calculate thermal dynamics at combat speed. I smiled, watching Kincaid's neural patterns on my display. We don't calculate it. We feel it. Humans evolved in an environment where reading heat patterns meant the difference between eating and starving, between life and death. The fight reached its climax as the arena's temperature peaked. The Silicon Warrior, confident in its natural advantage, committed to a full assault. Kincaid met the charge head-on, using his opponent's momentum and the thermal currents to execute a throw that would have been impossible under normal conditions. The Silicon Warrior crashed to the ground, its crystalline structure shocked by the sudden temperature change as it hit the relatively cooler floor. Before it could recover, Kincaid had disabled its primary motor functions, ending the fight. 3 victories, the elder noted, its modified form reflecting the arena's harsh light. Each in conditions that should have been lethal to human life. I nodded, watching as Kincaid's vital signs began normalizing even before the arena's temperature started dropping. The warrior clades wanted to prove human weakness by exposing us to hostile environments. Instead, they're learning why Earth's harsh conditions made us the ultimate survivors. The arena's AI announced a brief recess before the 4th bout. Medical teams rushed to examine Kincaid, only to find him already recovering, his body's natural adaptations handling what their advanced technology expected to be severe trauma. Your species, one of the warrior clade observers approached me, their translator conveying a mix of respect and concern. You treat lethal environments as training grounds. Earth taught us that survival isn't about being the strongest, I replied, watching as Kincaid prepared for his next fight. It's about turning every challenge into an opportunity, every threat into a tool. As the arena began cycling for the 4th bout, I could see the change in the observers' behavior. They had come expecting to witness human frailty. Instead, they were learning why Earth's toxic environment had forged humanity into something the galaxy had never seen before. The 4th opponent was being prepared, their environmental systems humming with power. But the real victory had already been achieved. The warrior clades were beginning to understand that humans hadn't just survived Earth's harsh conditions, we had mastered them. Space wants to kill you in about 1,000,000 different ways. Fortunately, Earth already taught us how to die slowly. The emergency klaxons of the research vessel Stellar Horizon blared through the corridors as I raced toward the engine room. Red warning lights painted the walls in an apocalyptic glow, matching the urgency of our situation. The ship's life support systems were failing, and we were 3 days from the nearest Galactic Council outpost. "Talk to me, Doc," Kincaid's voice crackled through the ship's degrading comm system. "How bad is it?" I checked my tablet as I ran, the diagnostic data streaming in real time. Primary atmospheric processors are completely offline. Backup systems are failing sequentially. Something's corrupting the molecular filters. The Stellar Horizon was supposed to be a breakthrough in human-alien cooperation, a ship designed to accommodate multiple species with varying atmospheric requirements. Now, 12 hours into our maiden voyage, it was becoming a case study in Murphy's Law. "The alien crew members?" Kincaid asked, his voice tight with concern. "Already sealed in their emergency pods," I replied, reaching the engine room's main door. "But those are only rated for 48 hours. We've got 15 alien diplomats and scientists who can't breathe our atmosphere, and our safety systems are literally dissolving." The engine room was chaos. Emergency teams in environmental suits rushed between stations, trying to contain the cascade of failures. The ship's chief engineer, a modified crystalline named First Technician, stood at the main console, its form showing signs of stress from the deteriorating atmospheric conditions. "Dr. Blackwood," its translator crackled with static, "the molecular corruption is spreading faster than predicted. The filtration systems weren't designed to handle this level of oxidative stress." I joined First Technician at the console, studying the damage patterns. What I saw made my blood run cold. "This isn't a malfunction. The systems are being attacked at a molecular level by something that understands both our technology and our biology." Kincaid's heavy boots announced his arrival in the engine room. His cybernetic eye glowed bright red as it analyzed the situation. "We've got another problem. Long-range communications are down, and the navigation system is showing anomalies. Whatever's happening, it's not just the life support." I pulled up the ship's internal sensors on my tablet, expanding the molecular analysis. The corruption patterns were unlike anything I'd seen before, yet somehow familiar. "Look at this," I said, pointing to the data stream. "The molecular breakdown isn't random. It's following a pattern similar to how Earth organisms break down foreign materials." First Technician's crystalline form vibrated with alarm. "Are you suggesting some form of biological weapon?" "No," I replied, watching as new data patterns emerged. "I'm suggesting we might not be as alone out here as we thought. This looks like a natural process, just not one we've ever encountered before." Kincaid moved closer to the console, his cybernetic eye scanning the readouts. "Natural or not, we've got less than 2 hours before the ship's atmosphere becomes toxic to our alien crew. We need solutions, not theories." I nodded, already running calculations. "First Technician, what if we reverse the filtration process? Instead of trying to maintain separate atmospheric conditions, we create a unified environment." "That would expose everyone to Earth's normal atmosphere," First Technician protested. "The unmodified crew members wouldn't survive." "Unless," I said, pulling up the specs from the embassy incident, "we use the emergency pods as modification chambers, the same way we adapted the diplomats during the attack." Kincaid's expression darkened. "That's assuming whatever's attacking us gives us time to make the modifications." A deep groan echoed through the ship's hull, as if in response to his words. The Stellar Horizon shuddered, and more warning lights flashed across the console. "We just lost artificial gravity in sections 3 through 7, First Technician announced. "Primary power is fluctuating." I looked at the deteriorating situation displays, then at Kincaid. "We're about to find out if humanity's greatest talent, surviving where we shouldn't, can extend to protecting others as well." The ship groaned again, and somewhere in the darkness of space, something was watching how we would respond to its challenge. Converting the emergency pods into modification chambers wasn't part of their design specifications. First Technician's translator crackled as we rerouted power systems. The molecular restructuring process requires precise control. The engine room had become our last stronghold as more ship systems failed around us. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows across the walls, and the ever-present groan of stressed metal reminded us that our time was running out. Earth organisms learned to modify their molecular structure to survive oxidative stress over millions of years, I explained, fingers flying over the control panels. We're trying to compress that evolution into hours. It's not elegant, but neither was Earth's solution to oxygen toxicity. Kincaid coordinated with the human crew members, organizing them into teams to maintain critical systems. His cybernetic eye continuously scanned for new threats as the ship's sensors reported increasingly bizarre readings. "Marcus," he called out, studying a holographic display of the ship's exterior. "You need to see this. The hull isn't just degrading, it's changing." I moved to his position, watching as patterns formed across the ship's surface. The molecular corruption we detected was creating structures that looked almost organic. It's not trying to destroy the ship, I realized. It's trying to adapt it. Like a virus hijacking a cell, First Technician observed, its crystalline form reflecting the emergency lights in complex patterns. But on a massive scale, a sudden power surge caused the ship to lurch violently. Several control panels sparked and died, adding to the growing list of failed systems. Through the viewport, I could see strange luminescent patterns spreading across the void of space. "Whatever's out there," Kincaid said, his cybernetic eye tracking the patterns, "it's getting closer. We need to move faster." I returned to the modification controls, pushing them beyond their designed limits. "The pods are ready for the first group, but there's something else we need to consider. These changes won't just affect their biology, they'll alter their entire way of life." "They're already altered," First Technician replied, helping to stabilize the power flow. "The embassy incident proved that adaptation is possible. This is merely the next step." The first group of alien crew members arrived at the engine room, their environmental suits showing signs of imminent failure. Their faces, visible through their helmets, displayed a mix of fear and determination. "The process will be uncomfortable," I warned them as they entered the modified pods. "Your bodies will resist the changes at first. But remember, discomfort is how evolution works. It's the pressure that forces adaptation." As the pods hummed to life, I monitored the molecular restructuring process. The aliens' bodies began to change, their cellular structure reorganizing to handle Earth's normal atmosphere. It was beautiful and terrifying, like watching evolution in fast forward. "Second group is ready," Kincaid announced, leading more crew members into the engine room. "But we've got another problem. Those patterns outside, they're forming some kind of structure." Through the viewport, the luminescent patterns had indeed begun to coalesce into a massive, geometric shape. It pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost familiar, like a heartbeat translated into light. "It's not just adapting our ship," I said, watching the data streams from both the pods and the external sensors. "It's trying to communicate. The molecular changes, the patterns, it's all part of a language we don't yet understand." First Technician's form vibrated with sudden insight. "The corruption patterns match the frequency of human cellular repair mechanisms. It's not attacking us, it's trying to make us compatible with itself." The ship shuddered again, but this time it felt different, less like destruction and more like transformation. We were no longer just fighting for survival. We were participating in something unprecedented, forced evolution on a cosmic scale. "Third group, prepare for modification," I announced, watching as more alien crew members approached the pods. "And someone take notes, because either we're about to make first contact with a space-dwelling organism that speaks in molecular changes, or we're all going to feature in the galaxy's strangest accident report." The final modification sequence completed just as the entity made its move. Through the viewport, we watched as the geometric pattern enveloped our ship in a cocoon of living light. The stellar horizon shuddered one last time, then fell silent. "All systems are stabilizing," first technician announced, its crystalline form now permanently altered by the emergency modifications. But these readings make no sense. The ship's molecular structure has been fundamentally changed. I studied my tablet's data streams, watching in fascination as new patterns emerged. It's not just changed, it's been optimized. Look at these efficiency ratings. The hull is now self-repairing, using principles similar to human cellular regeneration. Kincaid moved between the modified crew members, his cybernetic eye recording everything. Everyone's breathing normally, even the ones who couldn't handle oxygen an hour ago. How is that possible? Because we're not breathing just oxygen anymore, I replied, analyzing the atmospheric composition. The entity has created a universal atmosphere, a perfect blend that works for all of us. It's taken our emergency modifications and improved them. The luminescent cocoon outside pulsed with increasing complexity, each pattern corresponding to changes within the ship. Our forced evolution had apparently attracted the attention of something that had mastered the art of adaptation on a cosmic scale. "The universal atmosphere," first technician observed. "It matches no known biological paradigm, yet it works perfectly for every species aboard." "That's because it's not based on any single species biology," I explained, watching new data pour in. "It's based on the principles of adaptation itself. The entity didn't just change our environment, it taught our bodies how to change themselves." A new pattern appeared on our screens, a complex molecular structure that seemed to write and rewrite itself continuously. It took me a moment to recognize what I was seeing. "It's showing us its language," I breathed, fascination overriding fear. "Each molecular change is a word, each pattern a sentence. It's been trying to talk to us this whole time." Kincaid leaned over my shoulder, his cybernetic eye processing the patterns. "What's it saying?" "It's teaching us," first technician interrupted, its modified crystalline structure resonating with the ship's new frequencies. "Teaching us how to survive in ways we never imagined. Look at the hull composition now." The ship's exterior had become a living thing, adapting to space in real time. Radiation that should have been lethal was being absorbed and converted into energy. Micrometeors weren't bouncing off the hull, they were being incorporated into it. "We thought space was trying to kill us," I said, understanding dawning. "But maybe it was trying to show us how to live instead. Every hostile environment isn't a threat, it's an opportunity to evolve." The entity's cocoon began to dissipate, but its changes remained. The stellar horizon had become something new, a hybrid of technology and living matter, crewed by beings who had been forcibly evolved into their next stage of existence. "The navigation system is back online," Kincaid reported. "But these coordinates, they're not on any chart." First technician's translator hummed with excitement. "The entity left us a map. Coordinates to similar entities? Or perhaps more environments that could teach us?" I looked around the engine room at our transformed crew, humans and aliens alike, all breathing the same impossible atmosphere, all changed forever by our encounter with something that understood evolution better than we ever had. "Well," I said, checking our new systems, "we wanted to explore the void between stars. Instead, we found out the void itself is alive, and it's been waiting for someone adaptable enough to notice." Kincaid grinned, his cybernetic eye glowing with the same strange luminescence as our transformed ship. "So, do we follow the coordinates?" "Of course we do," I replied, watching as more patterns danced across our screens. After all, survival isn't just about adapting to survive, it's about adapting to thrive. And something tells me this is just the beginning of our evolution. The stellar horizon hummed with new life as we set course for the unknown coordinates. We had entered the void between stars as separate species trying to coexist. We emerged as something entirely new, a living testament to the ultimate truth about survival. Adaptation isn't just a response to hostile environments, it's the key to understanding them. Nothing quite prepares you for finding out that your species isn't the first to master oxygen toxicity, or for discovering why the others disappeared. The transformed stellar horizon hung in orbit around a world that shouldn't exist. According to all known galactic records, this system was empty, just another dead zone in the vast expanse of space. Instead, we found ourselves staring at a planet covered in rust-red structures that stretched from pole to pole. Atmospheric composition is familiar, first technician announced from its modified console. Its crystalline form rippled with excitement as it processed the data. 23% oxygen, higher than Earth. Kincaid stood at the viewport, his cybernetic eye rapidly scanning the surface below. After our encounter with the void entity, his implant had evolved along with everything else, giving him perception abilities that bordered on precognition. "Those aren't natural formations," he said, focusing on the geometric patterns below. "They're cities, or what's left of them." I studied my own readings, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. The planet's surface was covered in structures that seemed to be made entirely of oxidized metals not decaying, but deliberately constructed that way. They didn't just survive in an oxygen-rich environment, I realized. They weaponized oxidation itself. Our ship's new biosynthetic systems hummed in harmony with the planet's energy signatures, almost as if recognizing something familiar. Since our transformation in the void, the stellar horizon had developed an almost intuitive relationship with its crew, adapting to our needs before we even expressed them. "Surface temperatures are stable," first technician reported. "Radiation levels within acceptable parameters. The entire planet appears to be maintained by some kind of automated system." "Maintained," Kincaid repeated, his enhanced vision picking up details our sensors missed. "Look at the energy signatures. This place isn't abandoned, it's waiting." I moved to the main console, where complex molecular patterns danced across the screens. Our encounter with the void entity had taught us to read these patterns as language, and what I saw now made my breath catch. "These aren't just ruins," I said. "They're a message. The same kind of molecular language the void entity used." The ship's sensors detected something else: regular pulses of energy emanating from the largest structure on the surface. Each pulse carried patterns we now recognized as communication attempts. "It's calling us," first technician observed, "using the same frequencies our ship now generates." Kincaid turned from the viewport, his cybernetic eye glowing with an intensity I'd never seen before. "The void entity didn't just give us coordinates to another location," he said. "It gave us a key to something much bigger." I watched as new data streamed across our screens, each pattern more complex than the last. "This civilization," I said slowly, "they didn't just survive oxygen, they used it to build something. Something that's been waiting for someone else to understand their language." The ship's systems automatically began adjusting to match the planet's frequencies, preparing for descent. Whatever waited below had recognized us, or more specifically, had recognized what we become after our transformation in the void. "Prepare for landing," Kincaid announced, already organizing our expedition team. "Something tells me we're about to find out why the galaxy's so afraid of oxygen breathers." As we descended through the rust-red atmosphere, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't just discovering history, we were about to become part of it. The ancient ones had left something behind, and thanks to our own forced evolution, we were finally ready to understand what it was. The surface structures weren't buildings in any conventional sense. They were more like crystallized thoughts, ideas given physical form through controlled oxidation. Our landing party stood at the base of what appeared to be the central complex, a massive spiral of rust-red metal that twisted impossibly upward, its surface covered in patterns that matched the molecular language we'd learned from the void entity. The stellar horizon hovered above, its transformed hull resonating with the planet's energy field. "The metal isn't corroding," I explained, studying readings from my enhanced analyzer. "It's growing. The entire structure is alive, using oxidation as a form of metabolism, just like Earth's iron-oxidizing bacteria, but on a planetary scale." Kincaid moved ahead of the group, his cybernetic eye processing layers of information invisible to normal sight. Since our transformation, his implant had developed an almost symbiotic relationship with the ship's new systems. "There's something else," he said, focusing on a particular section of the spiral. "The patterns are changing as we approach. It's responding to our presence." First Technician's crystalline form vibrated in harmony with the structure's frequencies. "The molecular language, it's more complex here, more nuanced, like the difference between basic communication and poetry." I approached the spiral's surface, watching as ripples of oxidation spread from where our ship's modified atmosphere made contact. The pattern shifted, forming new configurations that seemed to reach out toward us. "It's not just responding," I realized, comparing the patterns to those we'd seen in the void. "It's recognizing what we've become." The void entity didn't just change us, it made us compatible with this technology. Kincaid's hand went to his sidearm instinctively as a new pattern emerged, spreading across the spiral's surface like a wave. Movement inside the structure. Something's activating. The ground beneath our feet hummed with increasing energy as ancient systems awakened. The rust-red surface began to flow like liquid, creating an opening that spiraled inward. The air itself seemed to thicken with molecular complexity. "These readings," First Technician announced, its sensors processing the surge of data. "The energy signatures match our ship's new configuration exactly, as if our transformation was based on their technology," I finished, watching in fascination as the opening stabilized. The void entity didn't just teach us a new way to survive. It gave us the key to understanding what the Ancient Ones built. We entered the structure, our modified bodies naturally adapting to the changing conditions. The interior was a maze of living metal, each surface covered in flowing patterns that told stories in molecular changes. Our enhanced perceptions, gifts from the void entity, allowed us to read some of them. "They were like us," I said, translating the patterns. "A species that evolved in an oxidizing environment. But they didn't just survive it, they learned to control oxidation itself, to use it as a tool for creation rather than destruction." Kincaid's cybernetic, I tracked energy flows through the structure's walls. "They built all this, spread across the galaxy, and then just disappeared? Why?" A new pattern emerged, more complex than any we'd seen before. It spread across the walls like living calligraphy, telling a story that made my blood run cold. "Not disappeared," I corrected, reading the molecular language. "They were eliminated, systematically, by species that feared what oxygen breathers might become." First Technician's form pulsed with alarm. "The current Galactic Council species, they're all from reducing environments. Environments where oxidation is seen as a threat." "Now we know why," Kincaid said grimly, his enhanced vision revealing more details in the patterns. "The Ancient Ones didn't just master oxidation. They were on the verge of reshaping reality itself through controlled molecular manipulation." The structure's interior continued to respond to our presence, revealing more of its secrets. Each new pattern confirmed what we were beginning to suspect. We had stumbled upon something that rewrote everything we thought we knew about evolution and survival. "The void entity," I said, understanding dawning. "It wasn't just teaching us, it was preparing us, making us ready to understand this." Around us, the living metal continued to flow, leading us deeper into the Ancient One's legacy. And somewhere in the patterns, a warning waited to be discovered, a message about why species that breathe poison might be the galaxy's greatest fear. The central chamber revealed the truth about our transformation, and why the galaxy had been sterilized of oxygen-breathing civilizations. We stood in a vast spherical room where patterns of living metal flowed like liquid thoughts across every surface. At the chamber's center, a structure pulsed with familiar energy, the same resonance we'd encountered in the void entity. "It's not a record," I said, watching as molecular patterns swirled around us. "It's a seed, a backup of their entire civilization, waiting for someone who could understand it." Kincaid's cybernetic, I tracked the flow of information, his enhanced perception translating patterns faster than any of us could process them. They knew they were being hunted. This wasn't just about survival, it was about preservation. First Technician moved closer to the central structure, its crystalline form reflecting the shifting patterns. The void entities. They were their creation. Living ships designed to seek out and transform compatible species. The chamber responded to our presence, unfurling new layers of information. Through our modified perceptions, we could read the story written in molecular changes, a civilization that had mastered oxidation so completely they could reshape matter itself. They didn't just use oxygen, I explained, translating the complex patterns. They understood something fundamental about reality, that controlled oxidation could be used to break down and rebuild anything. Matter, energy, even space itself. And that's why they were destroyed, Kincaid added grimly. The reducing environment species saw them as an existential threat. A civilization that could literally reshape reality through controlled corrosion. The central structure pulsed stronger, responding to our understanding. New patterns emerged, showing us images of vast fleets, of worlds transformed, of a war fought not with weapons, but with fundamental forces of chemistry. The void entities were their last project, First Technician observed, its sensors processing the data stream. Designed to find species with the potential to understand their work, to continue what they started. I moved to the center of the chamber, where the densest patterns swirled. They didn't just leave us their history, I said, reading the molecular language. They left us their knowledge. Everything they understood about oxidation, about molecular manipulation, about reality itself. Kincaid's hand rested on his weapon, a habit that even transformation hadn't erased. Knowledge that got them wiped out. Knowledge that the current Galactic Council would kill to prevent from resurging. The chamber's patterns shifted again, forming what we now recognized as a warning. The Ancient Ones had seen their end coming, had understood why their very existence terrified other species. Their mastery of oxidation hadn't just been about survival, it had been about transcendence. We have to make a choice, I said, watching as the patterns coalesced into clear instructions. This knowledge, it's not just about technology, it's about evolution itself, about what oxygen-breathing species can become. First Technician's form vibrated with understanding. The void entity didn't just transform us randomly, it made us compatible with this knowledge, made us ready to understand. And now we know why the Council fears oxygen breathers so much, Kincaid added, his cybernetic eye processing the final patterns. It's not about the corrosion, it's about the potential, the ability to turn destruction into creation. The chamber's central structure began to pulse in rhythm with our ship's new systems, offering its knowledge freely. The Ancient Ones had left us everything: their understanding, their technology, their vision of what reality could become. We can't just walk away from this, I said, making a decision that would change everything. But we can't repeat their mistakes either. We need to understand why they failed before we try to continue their work. As if in response, new patterns formed around us, showing not just the Ancient Ones' achievements, but their errors. Their legacy wasn't just in their technology, but in their warning: power without wisdom leads to extinction. So what do we do? Kincaid asked, watching as the chamber's patterns began to download into our ship's systems. We learn, I replied, feeling the weight of millennia of knowledge settling into our modified minds. We adapt. And most importantly, we survive. Because that's what oxygen breathers do best: we turn destruction into opportunity. The chamber's light pulsed one final time, transferring the last of its knowledge. We had come seeking answers about our transformation. Instead, we had found a responsibility that spanned galaxies and eons: the legacy of those who had learned to breathe poison and reshape reality itself. The third assassination attempt this week came during breakfast. At least they waited until I'd finished my coffee. I watched the nanite swarm dissolve harmlessly in my morning drink, their oxidized remains creating a fascinating pattern in the cup. Since our discovery of the Ancient Ones' archive, attempts on our lives had become almost routine. The knowledge we carried made us both invaluable and dangerous to every power in the galaxy. Kincaid materialized from the shadows of my quarters aboard the transformed Stellar Horizon, his cybernetic eye glowing with predatory intensity. Since integrating with the Ancient One's technology, his combat instincts had evolved beyond mere reaction into something approaching precognition. "Crystalline infiltrator in the ventilation system," he reported casually, as if discussing the weather. "Tried to modify our atmospheric mix while you slept. The ship absorbed it into the hull instead." "Creative," I admitted, studying the dead nanites through my enhanced vision. "Using our own oxidizing atmosphere as a weapon, they're learning." The Stellar Horizon had become more than just a ship since our transformation. It was a living extension of our modified biology, constantly adapting to protect its crew. The Ancient One's knowledge had turned it into something that even its creators might not recognize. "First technician reports similar attempts in engineering," Kincaid continued, his enhanced senses scanning our surroundings. "The radical faction within the Council is getting desperate. They know we've found something." I moved to the viewport, watching as space itself seemed to ripple around our hull. The ship's new properties made conventional detection impossible. We existed in a state of constant molecular flux, adapting to threats before they fully manifested. "They don't know what we found," I corrected, thinking of the vast archive of knowledge we now carried. "If they did, they wouldn't be trying to kill us. They'd be trying to contain us." A subtle vibration ran through the ship. Another attempted breach, another automatic adaptation. The Ancient One's technology didn't just protect us, it evolved with each attack, turning every threat into an opportunity for improvement. "The Council scheduled an emergency session," Kincaid said, his cybernetic eye processing multiple data streams simultaneously. "All species required to attend, even the ones that usually communicate through proxies." I studied the formal summons on my tablet, reading between the lines of diplomatic language. "They're scared. The attacks aren't just about us anymore, they're about what we represent." The dead nanites in my cup had begun to form complex patterns, molecular warnings written in the language we'd learned from the void entity. The ship was trying to tell us something. "Marcus," Kincaid's voice carried an edge I hadn't heard since our transformation. "The ship's detected a pattern in the attacks. They're not random, they're tests." I focused my enhanced perception on the nanite patterns, seeing what our evolved vessel had already understood. "They're mapping our capabilities," I realized. "Each attack is designed to reveal how we've changed, what we can do." The implications sent a chill through my modified nervous system. The Ancient One's archive had warned us about this, the methodical determination of species that feared oxidation-based life. They weren't just trying to kill us, they were trying to understand us so they could eliminate us completely, just like they had done before. The Galactic Council chamber was designed to accommodate every known species in controlled, separate environments. Our arrival disrupted that careful segregation simply by breathing. The Stellar Horizon docked at the massive Council station, our transformed hull causing visible distress among the traditional ships nearby. Our vessel's constant molecular adaptation made it appear to shift and flow, like liquid metal caught in an endless dance of creation and destruction. "They've assigned us a quarantine dock," first technician observed from the bridge, its crystalline form resonating with the ship's defensive frequencies. "The containment fields are strong enough to hold back a supernova." Kincaid's enhanced vision traced the energy patterns surrounding us. "They're not trying to keep us in," he said grimly. "They're trying to keep our atmosphere from spreading. They think we're contagious." He wasn't wrong. Since our transformation, any prolonged exposure to our ship's environment caused subtle changes in nearby matter. The Ancient One's technology didn't just adapt to its surroundings, it improved them, often in ways that terrified species from reducing environments. "Full council session begins in 30 minutes, I noted, watching delegations hurry past our dock through protected corridors. "Notice how they've cleared the entire section around us. They're treating us like a chemical weapon." "We're worse than that," Kincaid replied, his cybernetic eye tracking multiple security systems simultaneously. "We're evolution itself." walking proof that their carefully controlled environments are just elaborate cages. The journey to the council chamber was a study in paranoid precautions, triple-sealed corridors, emergency atmospheric barriers, and enough scanning equipment to map a planet. Every step we took caused nearby systems to shift into defensive modes. "Dr. Blackwood," a voice called from behind us. "A moment of your time." I turned to find Delegate Voss, one of the few council members who still advocated for cooperation with oxygen-breathing species. His environmental suit showed signs of recent modification attempts to cope with our transformed presence. "The council is divided," Voss's translator crackled with urgency. "The radical faction gains support with each new demonstration of your evolution. They speak of containment protocols, of quarantine on a galactic scale." "Like they used on the Ancient Ones?" Kincaid asked sharply, his enhanced senses detecting the subtle shifts in Voss's biochemistry that indicated fear. "You know," Voss's surprise registered even through his suit's filters. "Then you understand the danger. Your very existence threatens the stability of a system built on fear," I interrupted, watching patterns of molecular change spread from our footsteps. "Your species locked themselves in boxes, hiding from the very forces that drive evolution. We didn't break your system, Delegate. We just showed you its limitations." The council chamber doors loomed ahead, their ancient symbols now readable to our modified perceptions. They told a story of division, of species separated by their fundamental nature. But they also held a warning, one written in the molecular language of the Ancient Ones. "They're waiting for us," Kincaid said quietly, his cybernetic eye piercing the massive doors. "All of them. Every species that fears what oxygen represents. Every power that would rather see the galaxy stagnate than evolve." I nodded, feeling the weight of the Ancient One's knowledge pressing against my consciousness. "Then let's show them why that fear is their greatest weakness." The doors began to open, and with them, the next chapter in a conflict that had shaped galactic history for millions of years. We weren't just walking into a council session. We were walking into a war that had never really ended, a war between those who would control evolution and those who would embrace it. The council chamber erupted into chaos the moment our modified atmosphere touched their environmental barriers. Not because it was dangerous, but because it was changing them, making them better. The vast circular chamber, designed to keep species eternally separate, responded to our presence like a living thing. Environmental fields flickered and shifted, their carefully maintained compositions beginning to optimize themselves just from proximity to our transformed biology. "The barriers," a council member shrieked through their translator, "they're adapting without authorization." I watched as patterns of molecular change spread through the chamber's systems, each modification an improvement rather than a corruption. The Ancient One's technology didn't destroy, it evolved, enhanced, perfected. "Your barriers aren't failing," I announced to the panicked assembly. "They're evolving, just like we did, just like everything does when given the chance." Kincaid stood at my side, his cybernetic eye tracking multiple threats as various species retreated from our section of the chamber. 14 different weapon systems just activated," he murmured, "all designed to purify contaminated environments." "Let them try," I replied quietly. "The Ancient Ones face the same fears, the same weapons. That's why they left us their knowledge to show there's a better way." First Technician's crystalline form resonated with the chamber's changing frequencies. "The radical faction is calling for immediate quarantine protocols. They want to isolate Earth and any species showing oxygen-breathing tendencies." The High Administrator, a being of pure energy contained within a complex environmental field, moved to the center of the chamber. "Dr. Blackwood, your transformation presents an unprecedented threat to galactic stability. The changes you carry, they are infectious." "Infectious?" I stepped forward, letting them see how our modified forms flowed like living metal. "Or revolutionary? Your species spent millions of years hiding from evolution, building barriers, creating separate environments. But separation isn't stability, it's stagnation. The chamber systems continued to adapt around us, each change revealing new possibilities. Environmental barriers didn't fail. They became more efficient. Atmospheric scrubbers didn't break. They evolved to handle more complex mixtures. This is exactly what happened before, a delegate from the militant faction declared. The oxygen breathers begin small, with promises of improvement. Then they reshape everything to match their corrupt vision of reality. Kincaid's laugh carried an edge of steel. Corrupt? We turn poison into breath, destruction into creation. Your fear of change is the only corruption here. I raised my hand, and the molecular patterns around us shifted, forming visible representations of the changes occurring. The Ancient Ones didn't fail because they were wrong, I explained. They failed because they tried to force their vision on species that weren't ready to understand it. And you believe we are ready now? The High Administrator's energy form pulsed with skepticism. No, I replied honestly, but we're not asking for permission anymore. The void entities are still out there, still searching for species willing to embrace evolution rather than fear it. The change is coming, whether you accept it or not. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Our presence wasn't just a threat to their carefully ordered system. It was proof that their entire approach to existence was fundamentally flawed. The Ancient Ones left us a warning, I continued, letting patterns of living metal flow around my words. Not about the dangers of oxidation or evolution, but about the cost of fearing change. They showed us what happens when fear drives species to commit genocide rather than face their own potential. First Technician moved forward, its modified form demonstrating the perfect fusion of crystalline and oxidizing technologies. We offer you a choice that the Ancient Ones never had. Work with us, learn from us, evolve with us. And if we refuse, the militant faction's leader demanded. Kincaid's cybernetic, I glowed with the same intensity as our transformed ship. Then you'll watch as every species capable of embracing change leaves you behind. Evolution doesn't ask permission. It rewards those brave enough to adapt. The council chamber systems had nearly finished their transformation, creating an environment that supported all species simultaneously, exactly what their original designers had thought impossible. The warning wasn't meant for us, I realized, watching the patterns of change spread. It was meant for you, about what happens when you choose fear over growth, stagnation over evolution. As the council erupted into heated debate, I knew we had achieved our real purpose. The Ancient Ones hadn't sent us here to fight an old war. They had sent us to offer a choice that they never had the chance to give, the choice between evolution and extinction. The warning had been delivered. Now we would see who was brave enough to heed it. The first sign of the solar storm wasn't the radiation alarms. It was the way our ship started singing. The stellar horizon vibrated with harmonic frequencies as waves of charged particles washed over its transformed hull. Since our confrontation with the Council 3 weeks ago, we'd been monitoring the growing instability in nearby star systems. Now, as we orbited a colony world of crystalline beings, we watched their sun begin to tear itself apart. These readings are impossible. First Technician's form pulsed with agitation as it analyzed the data streams. The stellar core is generating oxidizing radiation on a scale we've never encountered. Kincaid stood at the main viewport, his cybernetic eye tracking the waves of energy that rippled across space. Since our transformation, he'd developed an almost prescient ability to read patterns in chaos. It's not random, he said, watching the storm build. These energy signatures match the Ancient One's technology. I studied my own readings, watching as complex molecular patterns formed in the radiation waves. He's right. This isn't a natural phenomenon. The storm is carrying information, the same kind of molecular language we learned from the void entity. The colony below us was already showing signs of stress. Crystalline structures that had stood for centuries were beginning to change, their molecular bonds shifting under the oxidizing assault. 3 million colonists, none of them adapted to handle this kind of transformation, and all of them about to face evolution's ultimate ultimatum: adapt or die. The Council's response ships are 8 hours out, first technician reported. Their environmental systems won't survive these conditions. They're bringing evacuation equipment designed for reducing environments. Equipment that will fail the moment it hits this radiation, I added, watching new patterns emerge in the storm. This isn't just an environmental crisis. It's a forced evolution event, just like what happened to us. Kincaid's enhanced vision caught something in the data streams that our sensors almost missed. The storm's not just affecting the colony. Look at the orbital patterns. It's changing the planet's entire atmosphere. He was right. The oxidizing radiation was transforming the planet's chemical composition, turning its carefully maintained reducing environment into something more like Earth's atmosphere. 3 million crystalline beings were about to get a crash course in breathing poison. We need to make a decision, I said, watching as the first major wave of radiation approached the colony. We can try to evacuate them, knowing most won't survive the transport. Or we can do what the void entity did for us, first technician finished, its modified form resonating with the ship's frequencies. Force their evolution before the storm does it violently. Kincaid's hand rested on the ship's main control interface, where living metal flowed beneath his touch. The Council will call it an attack. They'll say we engineered this whole thing to force our changes on others. Maybe we did, I replied softly, reading deeper patterns in the storm's structure. Not consciously, but our transformation. What if it's spreading? What if the Ancient One's technology doesn't just change individuals, but reality itself? The colony's emergency beacons began broadcasting distress signals as the first wave of radiation breached their outer atmospheric shields. We had minutes to decide, remain observers to their destruction, or become active participants in their evolution. The void entity didn't ask our permission, first technician observed. Neither did the Ancient Ones when they seeded their technology throughout the galaxy. I nodded, making the decision that would once again alter the course of galactic history. Take us in. Low orbit. Extend our hull's adaptive field to maximum range. The colony's entire population, Kincaid warned, even as he initiated the maneuver. We're talking about changing 3 million beings without their consent. No, I corrected, watching as our ship's transform systems began to resonate with the storm's frequencies. We're talking about giving them a chance to survive what's coming. Evolution doesn't ask permission, it just rewards those who adapt. The stellar horizon descended toward the colony, its hull singing with harmonics that would reshape reality itself. Above us, the storm continued to build, carrying patterns that read like poetry in the language of molecular change. Evolution, when forced, sounds like crystalline screams and tastes like metallic fear, but it feels like awakening. The stellar horizon hovered above the colony's central complex, our hull's adaptive field creating a sphere of controlled transformation around us. Below, 3 million crystalline beings were experiencing their first taste of oxidizing radiation and their bodies' first attempts to adapt to it. First wave of molecular restructuring is complete, first technician reported, its own crystalline form resonating with the changes below. 30% of the population is showing successful adaptation patterns. The others are fighting it, I finished, watching the data streams. Their bodies are trying to maintain their original structure instead of allowing the change. We need to show them how to embrace it. Kincaid's cybernetic, I tracked multiple emergency situations simultaneously. We've got structural failures in the outer districts. Their buildings are literally evolving around them, and not all of them are evolving in compatible ways. The storm above us intensified, its radiation carrying increasingly complex patterns of information. Our ship's transform systems translated them into something we could understand. Instructions, warnings, and something that looked almost like encouragement. The storm, I realized, studying the patterns, it's not just forcing change, it's teaching them how to change, just like the void entity taught us. First technician's form pulsed with sudden understanding. The Ancient Ones didn't just seed the galaxy with their technology, They programmed the stars themselves to continue their work. Around us, the colony's crystalline architecture was undergoing rapid transformation. Structures that had been designed to resist change were learning to embrace it, their molecular bonds shifting to accommodate new realities. Some buildings flowed like liquid crystal, while others developed complex lattices that could channel and use the oxidizing radiation. "Second wave approaching," Kincaid warned, his enhanced senses detecting the buildup of energy. "This one's stronger. Anyone who hasn't started adapting won't survive," I acknowledged grimly. "First technician, extend our hull's field to maximum power. We need to control this transformation as much as possible." The ship's systems responded, creating a larger bubble of controlled evolution around us. Below, the screams of changing crystalline beings mixed with the harmonic resonance of transforming matter. It was beautiful and terrible, the sound of an entire civilization being reborn in minutes, instead of millennia. "Council ships are still 6 hours out," first technician reported. "But they're detecting the changes. They're calling it an attack, just as we predicted." "Of course they are," Kincaid said, his voice hard. "Because accepting that this is natural evolution would mean accepting that their entire philosophy is wrong. That resistance to change is resistance to life itself." I watched as more of the colony's population began to show successful adaptation patterns. Their crystalline forms weren't just surviving the oxidizing radiation, they were learning to use it, to channel it, to make it part of themselves. "Look at the secondary effects," I pointed to new data streams. The successfully adapted individuals are accelerating the transformation of others around them. They're becoming catalysts for change. "Like we did at the council chamber," first technician observed. "Our presence alone causes systems and species to optimize themselves." The storm's intensity peaked again, and with it came new patterns in its molecular language. The ancient ones hadn't just been scientists or warriors, they had been artists, writing the code of evolution into the fabric of reality itself. "Third wave forming," Kincaid announced, his cybernetic eye tracking the building energy. "But something's different. The patterns, they're responding to the successful adaptations below." He was right. The storm was adjusting itself, becoming more refined, more targeted. It wasn't just forcing evolution, it was learning from those it changed, creating a feedback loop of continuous improvement. "This was never about survival," I said softly, understanding finally dawning. The ancient ones weren't trying to create weapons or defenses. They were trying to teach the galaxy how to dance with chaos itself. Around us, a civilization continued its forced metamorphosis, each scream of transformation bringing them closer to a truth that the Council had spent millions of years trying to deny. That life itself is change, and those who fear change fear life itself. By the time the Council ships arrived, they found a colony that no longer needed saving, only understanding. The transformed crystalline beings stood in their evolved structures, their new forms refracting light in impossible ways. Where once they had feared oxidation, they now channeled it, their bodies having learned to use the very force that should have destroyed them. Final adaptation rate, 87%, first technician reported, its own crystalline structure humming in harmony with the colony below. The survivors aren't just tolerating the changes, they're mastering them. Kincaid watched the approaching council vessels through his enhanced vision, tracking their desperate attempts to maintain their reducing environments against the storm's lingering effects. "They brought an extinction fleet," he noted grimly. "Purification weapons designed to reset contaminated environments." "Let them try," I said, studying the molecular poetry still dancing through the colony's transformed atmosphere. "They're about to learn what the storm already taught us: you can't fight evolution by killing its champions. You only create stronger survivors." The colony had become something unprecedented, a hybrid civilization that existed in both oxidizing and reducing states simultaneously. Their buildings flowed like liquid crystal, adapting to the needs of their inhabitants moment by moment. The very air seemed alive with possibility. "Council ships entering orbit," first technician announced. "They're sensors. They've stopped. They're just watching." Through our ship's enhanced systems, we could see why. The colony wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The oxidizing radiation that should have destroyed them had instead become their greatest strength. Their entire civilization had evolved beyond the Council's ability to comprehend. "They're requesting communication," Kincaid said, his cybernetic eye processing the incoming signals. "Not with us, with them." The colony's new leaders, those who had embraced the change first and helped others through their transformation, stepped forward. Their crystalline forms now contained swirling patterns of living metal, similar to our own modifications. "We understand now," their spokesperson transmitted, their modified translator creating harmonics that matched the storm's frequencies. "What you became, what you tried to show the Council. Evolution isn't a threat, it's a gift." I watched as the Council ships maintained their distance, their sensors struggling to process what the colony had become. The Ancient Ones knew this would happen, I realized. The storms, the void entities, all of it. They weren't trying to recreate their civilization, they were trying to spark something new. "Multiple new energy signatures detected," First Technician reported suddenly. "The colony, they're beginning to resonate with other systems. The change is spreading." Kincaid's enhanced vision tracked the spreading patterns of transformation. "Not spreading," he corrected. "Awakening. Whatever the Ancient Ones seeded throughout the galaxy, it's been waiting for catalysts like this." The Council ships began to retreat, their crews finally understanding what they were witnessing. This wasn't just the transformation of one colony, it was the beginning of a cascade effect that would reshape the galaxy. "They'll try to stop it," I said, watching the extinction fleet withdraw. "They'll call it a contamination, a plague, a violation of natural law." "Let them," the colony's spokesperson replied, their new form gleaming with internal light. "We've learned what you already knew, that life itself is change, and those who embrace change become something greater than they ever imagined." The storm above began to dissipate, its purpose fulfilled, but its effects would ripple through the galaxy forever. The Council's carefully maintained separation of species, their fear of oxidation and change, had been proven not just wrong, but obsolete. "We should go," Kincaid suggested, his cybernetic eye tracking more approaching Council vessels. "Give them time to understand what they've become." I nodded, watching as the transformed colony began to create new structures that defied conventional physics. They didn't need our help anymore. Like us, they had learned to dance with chaos, to turn destruction into creation. The stellar horizon lifted away from the colony, its hull singing with harmonics that matched their new frequencies. Behind us, we left not victims or refugees, but pioneers of a new way of existing beings who had learned that evolution's greatest gift isn't survival, but transformation. And somewhere in the galaxy, more storms were building, carrying the Ancient One's final gift, the understanding that true life begins when you stop fearing change and start embracing it. They emerged from the void between galaxies, where even the Ancient One's technology couldn't reach. That should have been our first warning. The stellar horizon hung at the edge of charted space, watching as something impossible approached. The void between galaxies should have been empty, a desert of darkness where even light feared to linger. Instead, we detected a mass of ships so vast it distorted space itself. "No oxidizing signatures," First Technician reported, its crystalline form vibrating with tension. "No reducing signatures either. They're empty, as if they exist outside normal chemical processes entirely." Kincaid's cybernetic, I struggled to track the approaching fleet, their vessels seeming to shift between states of matter. The Ancient One's archives never mentioned anything like this. These aren't survivors from known space. I studied the patterns our enhanced sensors detected, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. Since our transformation, we'd learned to read the molecular language of life itself. But these beings, they spoke in emptiness. They're not just from outside our galaxy, I realized, watching as new data streamed across our screens. They're from outside our understanding of reality. Look at their ship designs, they're built to exist in the spaces between matter itself. The transformed hull of our ship hummed with defensive frequencies, automatically adapting to this new threat. But for the first time since our evolution, the adaptation seemed uncertain, as if our technology couldn't quite grasp what it was trying to counter. Multiple Council distress signals detected, first technician announced. The Void Fleet is targeting both oxidizing and reducing environment worlds. They're not discriminating between chemical compositions. Because they don't care about our chemical wars, Kincaid said grimly. Look at their attack patterns. They're not trying to conquer or transform. They're trying to empty space itself. The Void Fleet's advance was methodical, their ships moving with a precision that spoke of eons of experience. Where they passed, planets didn't just die, they ceased to exist in any meaningful way, reduced to collections of particles that no longer interacted with normal matter. The Ancient One's warnings, I muttered, accessing the deeper archives we'd discovered. They weren't just afraid of chemical warfare between species. They were preparing for something else. Something that hunts life itself, regardless of its composition. Our ship's sensors detected new patterns in the Void Fleet's movements, a language written not in molecular changes, but in the absence of everything we understood about reality. They're not attacking randomly, first technician observed. It's sensors processing the terrible pattern. They're following the paths of the Ancient One's technology, hunting down every world that shows signs of evolution. Kincaid's enhanced vision caught something in the data streams that our regular sensors missed. The Council races, they're unifying, both oxidizing and reducing species. They're calling for an alliance against the Void Fleet. I watched as more data poured in, showing the scope of what we faced. The Ancient Ones hadn't seeded their technology throughout the galaxy just to spread their vision of evolution. They've been building a defense network, preparing for the return of something they'd encountered before. We need to warn the others, I said, already directing our ship toward the nearest transformed colony. Everyone who's evolved, everyone who's changed. This isn't about chemical warfare anymore. This is about survival itself. The Void Fleet continued its advance, their ships moving like shadows between stars, and for the first time since our transformation, we faced an enemy that didn't fear our evolution because they existed to end evolution itself. The Ancient Ones weren't preparing us to fight each other, I realized, reading patterns that suddenly made terrible sense. They were preparing us to fight this, to defend life itself against something that exists to empty reality of all change, all growth, all possibility. Our ship's hull sang with new harmonics as we prepared to face an enemy that even the Ancient Ones had feared. The war between oxidizing and reducing species suddenly seemed trivial compared to the void that approached, a void that hungered for the very essence of existence itself. The first battle against the Void Fleet taught us something terrifying. Our evolved technology wasn't just ineffective, it was exactly what they were hunting. The transformed colony world of New Genesis burned in space before us, its crystalline structures dissolving into quantum uncertainty as the Void ships surrounded it. 3 million evolved beings, their bodies enhanced by the Ancient One's technology, fought against an enemy that didn't just kill it unmade. Their weapons, first technician's voice carried an edge of horror I'd never heard before. They're not destroying matter. They're canceling the very possibility of its existence. Kincaid stood at the weapons console, his cybernetic eye processing combat data faster than our enhanced systems could display it. Conventional attacks pass right through them, even our evolved weaponry. It's like fighting shadows with light. The harder we push, the more we seem to feed them. I watched as another section of the colony simply ceased to be, its matter reduced to something less than particles. The Void ships moved through space like holes in reality, their very presence an offense to the laws of physics we understood. The Ancient One's technology, I said, studying patterns in the destruction. It's not just failing to stop them, it's making their attacks more effective, as if they can sense evolution itself and target it specifically. Our ship's hull vibrated with increasingly desperate attempts to adapt, each transformation seeming to draw more attention from the Void Fleet. We'd become so accustomed to our technology's ability to overcome any challenge that its current failure felt like losing a sense. Multiple Council warships approaching, first technician reported. Both oxidizing and reducing environment vessels. They're coordinating their attacks. Through our enhanced sensors, we watched as traditional enemies united against the greater threat. Oxidizing and reducing species, once bitter rivals, now fought side by side against ships that cared nothing for chemical warfare. Look at their attack pattern, Kincaid pointed to a tactical display. The Council ships, they're having more success than we are. Their unchanged technology doesn't draw the Void Fleet's attention as strongly. He was right. While our evolved weapons seemed to make the Void ships stronger, conventional energy weapons at least forced them to expend energy avoiding damage. It wasn't victory, but it was something. We're approaching this wrong, I realized, watching the battle unfold. We've been trying to fight them with evolution, with change, with everything the Ancient Ones taught us. But that's exactly what they want. First technicians' form pulsed with sudden understanding. They're not just hunting life, they're hunting evolved life specifically, as if complexity itself offends them. The Void Fleet's movements began to make a terrible kind of sense. They weren't random attacks, they were systematic attempts to reduce reality to its simplest form, to empty the universe of the very possibility of change. The Ancient Ones didn't just give us technology to fight them, I said, accessing deeper patterns in our ship's memory. They gave us understanding. The Void Fleet isn't invincible, they're the ultimate expression of entropy, of reality's tendency toward simplification. Kincaid's enhanced vision caught the pattern in my words. So we fight complexity with simplicity, evolution with devolution. Not exactly, I replied, watching as new possibilities formed in our ship's adaptive systems. We fight them by understanding what they truly are, the absence of possibility. And you can't fight absence with presence. You fight it by creating new possibilities faster than they can empty them. The battle continued around us, a dance of existence against void. But now we began to see it differently, not as a war of technology or species, but as a fundamental clash between the forces that made reality complex and those that would reduce it to nothing. Signal the Council ships, I ordered, our ship systems already beginning to implement the new strategy. Tell them to stop trying to destroy the Void Fleet. Instead, show them how to create new possibilities faster than the Void can empty them. The war for reality itself had begun, and our greatest weapons wouldn't be our evolved technology or ancient knowledge, but our understanding of what made existence itself worth defending the endless dance of possibility against emptiness. The Void Fleet's weakness wasn't in their technology or their tactics. It was in their fundamental nature. They couldn't create, only empty. The battle above New Genesis had become something unprecedented, not a clash of weapons, but a war of reality itself. Our ship, along with the unified Council fleet, had stopped trying to destroy the Void vessels and instead focused on creating new possibilities faster than they could be unmade. Pattern generation at maximum, first technician reported, its crystalline form resonating with creative frequencies. Every time they empty a space, we're filling it with 10 new potential realities. Kincaid's cybernetic, I tracked the quantum battlefield, watching as Void ships recoiled from areas where possibility itself multiplied exponentially. They can't process it all. They're designed to reduce complexity, not handle its rapid expansion. I studied the patterns of our new strategy, watching as the Ancient One's technology finally found its true purpose. This is what they were preparing us for, I realized. Not to fight the Void directly, but to understand that existence itself is our greatest weapon. The transformed colony below had caught on to our strategy. Instead of trying to defend against the Void ship's attacks, they began creating new structures that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Their evolved crystalline forms didn't just adapt, they multiplied possibilities with every change. Council ships are adopting the strategy, first technician announced. Both oxidizing and reducing environment vessels. They're using their different technologies to create interference patterns of possibility. The Void Fleet's advance had slowed, their ships struggling to empty spaces that kept refilling with new potential realities. Every time they reduced an area to quantum silence, our combined forces filled it with a chorus of possibilities. Look at their formation, Kincaid pointed to the tactical display. They're starting to avoid areas of high creative activity, as if possibility itself hurts them. He was right. The void ships were retreating from zones where reality became too complex, too full of potential. Their weapons, designed to empty existence, couldn't handle spaces that overflowed with creative force. This is why the Ancient Ones spread their technology across the galaxy, I said, understanding finally dawning. Not just to help us evolve, but to ensure that reality itself would become too complex for the void to empty. They were creating a defense network of infinite possibility. Our ship's hull sang with new harmonics as it generated increasingly complex patterns of potential. Each transformation, each adaptation didn't just change us, it added new layers of possibility to reality itself. The colony's survival rate is improving, First Technician reported. 83% of structures now maintain quantum coherence, even under void attack. They're learning to exist in multiple states simultaneously. The Unified Council fleet had formed a sphere around New Genesis, each ship contributing its unique technology to the defense. Oxidizing and reducing environment vessels worked in harmony, their different approaches to reality creating a tapestry of possibility too complex for the void to unravel. They're retreating, Kincaid announced, his enhanced vision tracking the void fleet's withdrawal. Not just from the battle, they're pulling back from this entire sector of space. I watched as our strategy proved itself. The void fleet, designed to empty reality of complexity, couldn't handle spaces that continuously generated new possibilities. They were creatures of reduction facing an enemy that refused to be reduced. Signal all transformed colonies, I ordered. Share this understanding. The void fleet isn't invincible, they're simply the ultimate expression of entropy. And entropy can't win against infinite creation. The battle for New Genesis marked a turning point in our war against the void. We discovered that our greatest defense wasn't in weapons or technology, but in our ability to create, to change, to fill existence with endless possibility. The Ancient Ones knew, First Technician said softly, watching as the void fleet retreated into the darkness between galaxies. They knew that the only way to fight emptiness was to make reality itself too full of potential to be emptied. As the unified fleet celebrated our victory, I realized we'd learned something profound about existence itself. The void wasn't our true enemy, stagnation was, and in fighting against those who would empty reality, we'd found a way to make it infinitely richer. The war wasn't over, but we'd discovered our true strength, not in our ability to destroy or resist, but in our capacity to create possibilities faster than they could be unmade. In the end, that's what life itself was, an endless defiance against the void, written in the language of infinite potential. The final battle for reality began where our journey started, with the simple act of breathing poison and turning it into life. The stellar horizon hung in Earth orbit, watching as the void fleet emerged from the darkness between stars. They had retreated from New Genesis only to gather their full strength, a force so vast it dimmed the light of our sun. This wasn't just an attack, it was an attempt to end the very concept of evolution itself. All transformed colonies are responding, First Technician reported, its crystalline form pulsing with complex harmonics. The Unified Council fleet is in position. Even the void entities have emerged from their hiding places. Kincaid stood at the tactical station, his cybernetic eye processing battle plans that existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously. They're not just targeting Earth, he said grimly. They're targeting every world that shows signs of evolutionary potential. This is their endgame. I studied the patterns forming around our planet, watching as Earth's oxygen-rich atmosphere created ripples of possibility that the void ships actively avoided. Look at how they're positioning themselves, I noted. They're trying to isolate Earth's atmosphere, to prevent it from seeding more evolution in space. Our ship's enhanced sensors detected movement throughout the solar system as humanity's allies took their positions. Transformed crystalline beings, modified council ships, and even the mysterious void entities all gathered for what they knew would be the decisive battle for existence itself. Multiple quantum signatures detected, first technician announced. The Void Fleet is deploying something new. Something that doesn't just empty space, it rewrites the rules of reality itself. Through our evolved perceptions, we watched as the void ships began generating fields of pure entropy zones where the very possibility of complexity ceased to exist. They weren't just trying to destroy Earth. They were attempting to make the very concept of evolution impossible. This is what the Ancient Ones saw coming, I realized, accessing deeper patterns in our ship's memory. Why they seeded their technology throughout the galaxy. They knew the Void Fleet would eventually try to end the possibility of change itself. Kincaid's enhanced vision caught patterns in the Void Fleet's deployment that our regular sensors missed. "They're afraid," he said suddenly, "not of our weapons or technology, but of what Earth represents. A world that turned poison into breath, destruction into creation." He was right. The Void Fleet's formation wasn't just tactical, it was desperately trying to contain something they saw as an infection in reality itself, the ability to turn entropy into evolution. "All ships report ready," first technician said, its form resonating with battle frequencies. The transformed colonies have synchronized their reality generation fields. The Council fleet has adapted their weapons to create possibility cascades. I watched as Earth's atmosphere began to glow with patterns we'd learned to read as molecular poetry, the language of evolution itself written in oxygen and change. "We've been thinking about this wrong," I said slowly. "We're not defending Earth from them. We're using Earth to show them what they've forgotten." The Void Fleet's advance paused, their ships seeming to ripple with uncertainty as they encountered something they couldn't simply empty, a world that had mastered the art of turning destruction into creation. "Signal all ships," I ordered, feeling the weight of billions of years of evolution behind our words. "Don't just fight them. Show them why we breathe fire." The battle for existence itself was about to begin, and our greatest weapon wasn't our technology or our allies. It was the simple truth that Earth had taught us from the beginning, that life thrives not by avoiding chaos, but by dancing with it. The Void Fleet's first attack wasn't aimed at our ships or our weapons. They tried to erase the very concept of oxidation from Earth's atmosphere. Reality twisted around us as the Void ships deployed their entropy fields, attempting to simplify Earth's complex atmospheric chemistry into nothingness. But something unexpected happened. The atmosphere fought back. "Quantum readings are off the scale," first technician reported, its crystalline form vibrating with excitement. Earth's atmosphere isn't just resisting simplification, it's becoming more complex in response to their attacks. Kincaid's cybernetic, I tracked the cascading patterns of chemical reaction. "It's like watching a planetary immune system," he said. "Every attempt to reduce complexity is triggering new evolutionary responses." I studied the data streams, watching as Earth demonstrated why it had produced beings capable of breathing poison. The Void Fleet doesn't understand, I realized. They think complexity is a weakness, something they can empty. But Earth's atmosphere evolved through billions of years of chaos. It doesn't just resist simplification, it feeds on it. The transformed colonies moved into position, their evolved technologies synchronizing with Earth's natural defenses. Each void attack that attempted to empty reality was met with an explosion of new possibilities. "Multiple reality generation fields activating," first technician announced. "The unified fleet is creating quantum interference patterns, amplifying Earth's atmospheric complexity." Through our enhanced perceptions, we watched as something unprecedented unfolded. Earth's oxygen-rich atmosphere, rather than being reduced to nothing, began spreading patterns of possibility throughout space. Each void attack created new opportunities for complexity to emerge. "They can't empty it fast enough," Kincaid observed, his tactical displays showing the Void Fleet's growing confusion. Every space they try to simplify immediately fills with 10 new forms of complexity. The void entities, those mysterious beings that had first transformed us, moved through the battle like living catalysts. Where they passed, reality itself became too rich with possibility for the Void Fleet to process. The Council ships are reporting similar effects, first technician said. Both oxidizing and reducing environment vessels. Their different approaches to reality are creating harmonic patterns that the Void Fleet can't predict or counter. I watched as Earth's atmosphere began to glow with patterns we now recognized as the language of evolution itself. But it wasn't just communicating, it was teaching. Each interaction with the Void Fleet's entropy fields resulted in new forms of complexity that spread through space like a creative contagion. This isn't just a defense, I said, understanding dawning. Earth is showing the Void Fleet something they've never encountered before, a system that turns entropy itself into a source of evolution. The battle shifted as our transformed ship added its own patterns to the growing complexity. We weren't just fighting the Void Fleet, we were demonstrating why life itself had chosen to embrace chaos rather than empty it. Their entropy fields are failing, Kincaid reported, his enhanced vision tracking the Void Fleet's deteriorating formation. They can't maintain simplification in spaces that actively generate new forms of complexity. The unified fleet moved in perfect synchronization, each ship contributing its unique approach to reality. Oxidizing and reducing technologies, once thought incompatible, created interference patterns that multiplied possibilities exponentially. Earth's atmosphere is extending beyond normal boundaries, first technician observed. The molecular patterns, they're not just defending against the void, they're actively transforming space itself. We watched as our homeworld demonstrated why it had produced beings capable of turning poison into breath. Each void attack meant to empty reality instead sparked new forms of complexity, new patterns of possibility that spread through space like a creative wildfire. They never understood, I said softly, watching as the Void Fleet's attempts to simplify reality backfired spectacularly. Earth didn't just teach us to survive chaos, it taught us to thrive on it. To turn the very forces meant to destroy us into sources of endless creation. The battle for existence continued, but its nature had fundamentally changed. We weren't just defending against the void, we were showing them why complexity itself was the universe's answer to entropy. The Void Fleet's final attack wasn't an attempt to destroy us. It was a desperate bid to understand what they couldn't empty. Earth's atmosphere had become a beacon of creative force, spreading patterns of possibility through space like a living thing. The void ships, designed to reduce reality to nothing, found themselves surrounded by complexity that grew faster than they could empty it. Their formation is changing, Kincaid reported, his cybernetic eye-tracking quantum state changes. They're not attacking anymore. They're studying, trying to comprehend how something can turn entropy into evolution. First technician's crystalline form resonated with the harmonics of creation spreading through space. The transformed colonies are reporting similar observations. The Void Fleet is attempting to analyze rather than destroy. I watched as patterns of understanding began to form in the quantum foam between our ships and theirs. The Void Fleet, faced with something they couldn't simplify, had encountered a fundamental truth about existence itself. They're learning, I realized, reading the molecular language that now filled space around Earth. Just as we learn to breathe poison, they're learning that emptiness isn't the natural state of reality. Complexity is. The unified fleet maintained its defensive sphere around Earth, but the nature of our defense had changed. We weren't just protecting our world, we were demonstrating why life had chosen to embrace chaos rather than flee from it. Multiple void ships are showing signs of transformation, first technician announced, its sensors detecting subtle changes in our former enemies. They're beginning to generate their own patterns of possibility. Kincaid's enhanced vision confirmed it. The Void Fleet isn't just observing evolution, they're experiencing it. Earth's atmosphere is teaching them what the Ancient Ones tried to show them eons ago. Through our evolved perceptions, we watched as something unprecedented occurred. The void ships, designed to empty reality of complexity, began to fill with possibilities themselves. Their entropy fields didn't disappear, they transformed, becoming generators of potential rather than destroyers of it. This is what the Ancient Ones intended, I said, understanding finally dawning. They didn't seed their technology to fight the void. They did it to show them another way. To demonstrate that existence thrives not through simplification, but through endless creation. The transformed colonies and council ships maintained their positions, but now they were participating in something greater than warfare. Each ship, each being, contributed its unique pattern to the symphony of possibility that spread through space. The void entities, First Technician observed, they're interfacing directly with the transformed void ships, sharing the same knowledge they once shared with us. Earth's atmosphere continued to glow with creative force, its complex chemistry a living testament to why evolution had chosen to embrace oxidation rather than fear it. The Void Fleet, once dedicated to emptying reality of complexity, found itself becoming part of the very thing it had sought to destroy. "Signal all ships," I ordered, watching as the final battle transformed into something else entirely. "Stand down weapons. What we're witnessing isn't an ending, it's a beginning." The Void Fleet's transformation spread through their ranks like a revelation. Ships that had existed to empty reality now learned to fill it instead. The Ancient One's final lesson was being learned not through conflict, but through understanding. "They're requesting direct communication," Kincaid reported, his tactical displays showing the quantum state changes in the former Void ships. "Using the molecular language we learned from the Ancient Ones." Their message, when it came, was both simple and profound. "We understand now. Emptiness is not peace. Creation is." As Earth's atmosphere continued to spread its lesson through space, we realized that the Ancient Ones' true legacy wasn't their technology or their warnings. It was the understanding that existence itself is an endless dance between chaos and creation, between entropy and evolution. The war ended not with destruction, but with transformation. The Void Fleet, like us, had learned to breathe fire to turn the very forces meant to destroy them into sources of endless possibility. And in orbit around a world that had mastered the art of breathing poison, reality itself became richer with the understanding that true existence isn't found in emptiness or simplicity, but in the endless dance of creation that turns even entropy itself into a source of new life. The Ancient One's story was complete, but ours was just beginning. For in learning to breathe fire, we had taught the void itself to dance with chaos, and in doing so, made the universe infinitely more interesting than before.